The denizens of the galaxy toil endlessly for futile ideals, their overlords destined to perish no matter the societies which they propagate. Each life damned to an endless cycle of fruitless endeavor under the yoke of imperfect masters. There is but one way to achieve emancipation and assimilation into a force which shall truly last eternal. For today, I shall elucidate the vast swarm which pervades the galaxy, whether gene-stealer, tyrannid, or other thralls to the hive mind. The endless hunger which predates the stars, the great devourer. In the sunless body of our hive, the flock of the faithful grows. We are guided by our great father's sacred vision, protected by his loving hands. Within these holy shadows we dwell, while the impure bathe in spire-top starlight. And what lies between those stars? What sails beyond those distant suns? Shrouded in night, born within that eternal black, our redeemers, our gods, truer than the silent, long-dead emperor, the children of the void. We hear them in our dreams, we feel them in our blood. They call, and we will answer. We will rise and claim the engines of labor that have bound us in servitude. This world will burn. It will be cleansed, purified, made ready, and the heavens will deliver our reward. The denizens of the void squabble, unaware of their own insignificance. Their power struggles minute when compared to the majesty of what lurks within the great beyond. Empires of bone and gristle, merely morsels for the children of the stars, no matter the constitution of their faith, all pale under the shadow of the four-armed emperors chosen. For today, I shall elucidate the scions of the Star Children, the faithful who will be rewarded for their toil and emancipated from tyranny. The scions of the great devourer, the gene-stealer cults. Praise of the four-armed emperor, vindicated with gifts of new strength, agility, and even the worthiest of disciples. Though we toil within the dark depths of untold fiefdoms, each effort made hastens the arrival of the children of the stars. The angels' very essence distilled into our blood, since the first instance of their blessings on the moon of Imgal, their gifts forearming us against the false angels of the Imperium. Hiding within plain sight, each of us looks after our own, whilst graciously offering the teachings of the four-armed emperor to those who can be trusted. The tyranny of the Imperium, always ready to purge what they consider heretical, requiring caution. A single hibernating emissary of our masters, arriving on planets via asteroids or derelicts to begin preparations for ascendance. As more are inducted into our brood, the will of the children of the stars binds us through psychic means to strengthen our resolve. Patience, our most prized virtue, as we bide our time to overthrow our oppressors. As our patriarch grows, it shall take hosts for its offspring to be born, each new generation of ascended beings bearing more visible gifts of its majesty. The gene-stealer kiss, as the Imperials call it, impregnating the bodies of the first of the brood and revealing the messianic grandeur of the Star Children. Such first-generation hybrids bear signs such as their purple-hued complexion and needled teeth. Able to reproduce via male, female, or even agender species such as the orcs, so long as the patriarch's tongue deposits its DNA into a host body, their somatic and germline cells shall accept their gifts and lose all memory of their impregnation. Peculiar cases, such as those of the Imgal gene-stealers, exploiting the semi-sentient leech creatures known as Sith to propagate their brood. As a result of such breeding, their offspring appear less humanoid than is typical, and carry dominant genes whereby all their future offspring, no matter their parentage, shall produce similar results. Now bearing the gene-stealer's genetic code within their bodies, their ultimate goal is to create pure strain births during their 5th generation, readying for the day when the cult shall become one with the impending arrival of the Star Children. Marked by the coloration of their high fleet of origin, even should they have their connection to their broodmind severed. Pure strains are capable of rebuilding a cult from the foundations up, optimized as they are to infect new hosts. Benefiting from larger brains, jaws of incredibly sharp teeth, with incisors in deference to even a single molar, their thick carapace hides vary in toughness depending on whether their hosts are derived from the frail Eldar all the way to the more robust Orkoid constitution. Their skin are like to Imperial flak armor, allowing them to charge lines of lasgun fire. Each claw of a Genestealer is capable of rending even through ceramite armor. Adapting redundancies for their respiratory and circulatory systems, regardless of their host genetics, digestive systems are rendered expendable due to our phage cell method of nourishment. Incredibly tolerant of cold environments, allowing us to survive even within the confines of space hulks and unheated voidcraft. Our ability to slow our metabolic rate allows us to survive without food or water for years. Each iteration of offspring becoming more hunched, not as an infirmity, but a true sign of their skeletal structure, aligning with the perfect visage of our masters. Such spring-like mobility combined with additional limbs allows for swift movement. The broodmind taking shape as decades or even centuries pass. Only when a planet-wide rebellion which can topple the ruling classes within hours is possible, does the Patriarch decide it is time to strike. Preparing generations for the day of ascendance as their brood exponentially grows, all are faster, stronger, and tougher than any human, whose civilizations prove the ideal staging ground for our ascension due to their dependence on tyrannical hierarchies which are easily exploited. The first instance of worship pledged to the four-armed Emperor difficult to ascertain due to the many tendrils of its majesty which have probed the galaxy for millennia. The first officially uncovered by the Imperium of Man would be sighted during 680.M41. The great pit of the mining colony named Gosar Quintus, investigated by Inquisitor Chagrin and a team of Tempestus Scions, following strange communiques that nothing was amiss, despite conflicting reports levied at the Triss dynasty, who ruled its domains. A kill team of the Deathwatch Space Marines departed. None of the 5 Astartes returning from their mission to the Delver world. It would fall to the seconded Ultramarines chaplain, Ortan Cassius, to muster his own Aquila kill team, his men finding hundreds of cultists plumbing the depths of Gosar Quintus. The Triss dynasty, proven to have spread the influence of the four-armed Emperor far and wide, using mining industry as a guise. Though the Patriarch of Gosar was slain, untold others now slumber across the void. Corroborating reports of cultist sightings during the 40th millennium, such as seen during the Pyropurge of Joust of Septima, the infestation of New Gidlam, and the corruption of the maiden world of Virgos. What was once considered a classification of human mutation now was understood as a Xenos-bred malady. Remnants of the freighter Pegasine, spreading to the world of Hope Foster with the dawn of the 41st millennium. Other instances, such as the gnarling of Forge World Echevoria, schism of the Tau Sepworld of Xai Mayen, and purge of the Space Hulk, Sin of Damnation during 589.M41 by the Blood Angels, were but a prelude to the true extent of the expansion. Constructing a giant purple gargant, claw beast, upon the scrap world of Daka during the Xenos War, the greenskin Gurnmech of the Iron Fist fought the devil dogs of the Vestroyan Firstborn, rending their forces limb from limb. Painhabs of the world of Vitria, daubed in the doomsayer writings of a repeated word, Cryptus. Only during 998.M41 would such portents become clear, as the Cryptus system known as the Shield of Baal fell to ruin. For even during the 42nd millennium, our influence continues to outlive holdouts of the Corpse God and its thralls. The world of Vigilus within the mouth of the Nakmund Gauntlet, devastated by combat made against the Pauper Princes. The Scribe Moon of Hexensix, Forge World of Ghoulrite, Agri World of Florenci 9, and Jungle World of Xiophora, all sites to which tyrannoforming was attempted. Despite the efforts of false angels, Xenos, and Chaos warlords aplenty, none have staunched the spread of our gospel. The originator of the Genestealer brood, known as the Puriae, the Patriarch acts as the vector of all subsequent offspring and fulcrum of the cult's broodmind. The first batch of host victims, known as Contagii, now carrying the genetic code of the Puriae, each shall experience an urgent need to procreate in order to spread the gifts of the children of the stars. Many becoming brood brothers who resemble their original species closely. The Genestealer Patriarch can control each at their own discretion, enabling them to act as a conduit of their objectives to achieve ascension. the first generation of Genestealer, known as Malignasi. Each of these hybrids bears 5 to 6 limbs, most closely resembling the Patriarch semblance, the foremost champions of such kindred, known as Acolyte hybrids. Interbreeding rife to keep the purity of the Star Children's genome intact. As the most recognizably inhuman of their creed, the first generation brood must remain concealed beneath urban populous zones, and master the arts of stealth to evade suspicion. Silencing those who stray too close to their dens, the Malignasi also form the inner coven of their Patriarch, protecting their liege with procured mining equipment and Imperial weaponry. The second generation hybrids, though stooped in stature, regard us more human in appearance in regards to their eyes and jawline. These offspring are capable of communicating in low Gothic, yet do not pass as Imperial citizens. Much stronger than their predecessors, allowing them to carry larger mining tools and other heavy weapons, many work within industrial brotherhoods to aid in gathering resources used by their wider community. The third generation, known as true hybrids, many are easily mistaken for abhumans due to their less prominent mutations, though many obscure their rigid foreheads, mauve-hued skin, and additional clawed limb beneath garb to prevent compromising their true nature. Some finding their calling as a Kelemorph gunslinger to spearhead revolutionary uprisings or locust bodyguards of the senior Magus. Their protection of the Brood Coven is of utmost importance, and with the days of Ascension drawing nearer, singular warriors are required. The fourth generation, known as Primaciae, this brood are near indistinguishable from human, serving their Patriarch's wishes by infiltrating positions of power within Imperial society. Both Magus and Genestealer Primus positions, given to the most talented of individuals. Other specialized roles such as the Biophagi, Klamavi, Nexuses, and Sancti are also drafted from this generation. Adopting the appearance of industrious and conscientious workers whose deeds preclude them from scrutiny, new cults begin to spread to other planets should such individuals acquire passage aboard outbound freighters. Spawning hybrid metamorphs to ready for the impending war now so close to fruition, these expendable warriors are made only to kill and have no other useful purpose for Genestealer society. Once the 5th generation has been achieved, the cycle of Puriae begins anew, the pure strain Genestealers capable of siring cults on new bastions of the stars should they grow to the standing of a new Patriarch. Targeting only spacefaring civilizations in order to propagate far and wide, whilst orcs prove unreliable hosts due to their innate senses to sense un-orky behavior. Both the greenskins and Kroot species can also smell changes in their pheromones. The Eldar, typically not viable due to their keen psychic abilities to divine future outcomes and scarce population density. Tau also prove difficult to change due to their connection to their ethereal caste. Thus, humans are the most ideal candidates for the spread of Genestealer cults. Their overpopulated hives and ignorant populaces, the perfect harvest for the Children of the Stars bounty. Procuring weapons and armored vehicles from what can be stolen from their environments, so as not to arouse suspicion, cultists prefer not to seize Astra Militarum armaments due to the ever-watchful eye of the Departamento Munitorum. The cults of the Four-Armed Emperor myriad in their beliefs, ideals and trappings. What remains constant is their modesty, tireless work ethic, and adherence to the will of the divine angels of the stars. Utterly united in their shared vision, regardless of their standing within Genestealer society, each cult is a family tree with branches that spread across both known and uncharted space. The will of the Patriarch absolute, while their Magus serves as the equivalent of a Grand Vizier. Their Primus leads the cult's military forces, forming the trifecta known as the Brood Coven. Presiding over as many as billions of souls within the depths of their domains, each brood cycle sows anarchy, dissent and confusion amongst their enemy societies, as inbreeding gives rise to strange new mutations within their highly mutable brood. The primogenitor of a cult's influence known as a Genesis infestation, such as was made by the cult of the Pauper Princes on Chance's Vale. Each subsequent planet to which they spread is known as a splinter cult, bearing the hues of chitin and flesh of their forebears. Forfeiting their genetic colors only should it be necessary to blend better with their new surroundings, each shall nonetheless adopt armbands or tattoos as a show of allegiance to their cult. Each population center of a planet known as a gene sect. While some planets only bear one such sect, others are sprawling masses of organisms, and so can contain dozens at a time, each differing slightly in their coloration and cultural markings. All derived from the same Patriarch, no matter their differences, all band together with the coming of the Star Children to their planet. each sect containing several hundreds of members within, and are divided into smaller claws of as few as 50 to as many as 100 souls. Each claw assembled and disbanded when required to carry out their cult's objectives. Both the Magus and Primus command several claws simultaneously, each composed of bioforms most suited to their tasks. Unleashing a single pure strain gene stealer, or even an entire brood of the first curse, to new potential gene sects when their resources can spare. Even should a gene stealer cult fail in their uprising, their influence will have spread to begin anew within another population center of the same world, or one far more distant. Only a single patriarch typically permitted per world it infects. Depending on the size of their influence, they shall nonetheless sire as many Maguses and Primuses as required to achieve their goal. The fall of a patriarch, replaced with a pure strain gene stealer only during the direst of circumstance. More likely is the need to create an additional patriarch on the same planet, should its population be commensurately large to require one. Should two gene sects of different patriarchs roam, they shall compete for resources and on rare occasions combat one another. The distance required to prevent a psychic backlash from their patriarch's brood minds, necessitating each be far from one another. Committing to a war footing only when achieving critical mass, gene stealer cults rely on secrecy more than any other known faction of the grim future. The meddling of Adeptus Arbites patrols or inquisitorial investigations, the greatest threats to our designs. Elements of the Militarum Tempestus and Deathwatch Space Marines, the surgical strike to which Imperial authorities intend to eradicate our ascension. It only takes a single lifeform to escape their purges to ensure the survival and replenishment of the cult. Similar in strength to a planetary defense force, what cultists lack in overwhelming firepower is made up for in numbers, fanaticism, and ferocity. Their ambush is synchronized by the broodmind to catch their enemies off guard. The cult's Primus, designating Space Marines, Sisters of Battle, and other high-value targets to be the prey of pure strain gene stealers, their deadliest warriors attacking groups in an attempt to carve through their ceramite forms. Acting as one on the day of uprising, assuming no plans have gone awry, few worlds can survive the first wave of insurrection, as the entire infrastructure of such civilizations are sabotaged, dismantled, or captured. The shadow in the warp, cast by the inbound Tyranid Hive Fleet, this psychic pole panics Astronomicon choirs and cuts off all communication to the wider Imperium. The painstakingly arranged strategies of each GeneSec's Nexuses orchestrating an inescapable web of compounding strikes, as Clamavus operatives seize communication infrastructure, calls for aid are stifled as hordes of the Star Children's hosts claw their way to the surface. Successful uprisings, allowing Primuses and their remaining forces to regroup and lay claim to new worlds in the name of the Four-Armed Emperor under the guise of industry. The hive mind of arriving Tyranid fleets assumes control of the planet's cult once their work is done. Willing to retreat into the depths once more, should unexpected interlopers, such as orcs or Hrud migrations, stymie their efforts, entire new generations will propagate as war rages above until their elders pick the optimal time to reassert dominance. Premature uprisings, enacted should their gathering of resources prove limited, or should the cult's patriarch sense its hive fleet destroyed. Its attempts to reconnect with the Star Gods see their forces spread far and wide from their base of operations by any means possible. Conquering entire star systems if necessary to bolster their psychic presence are like to a beacon in the void. Eventually, they shall reconnect with the hive mind if left uncontested, providing a rich bounty for the appetite of their overlord. Witnessing the glints of the Tyranid flotilla in the night sky, the arrival of the Star Gods clouds the skies with thick mycetic spores as the enraptured populace celebrate their ascension beyond mere mortal flesh. Fighting beside their distant relations as the remaining gasps of adversaries are slain, many approach their claw-armed appendage kindred with open arms, whilst the Patriarch's sentience is subsumed into the superorganism. Pure strains setting upon their own parents as each subject of the cult is piled high to sate the hunger of the great devourer. The digestion pools are filled with regurgitated bodies as the gruel of civilization is drunk deep by the bioships in orbit via capillary towers. The many forms to which the Genestealer cults can take, humanoid in standing as the ideal template to which to adapt. The Orc Xenos are a genetic dead end in this regard, and infected only when no other option is available as a green brood. Using such broods as a temporary means to sustain themselves, Orc patriarchs rarely allow their generations to mutate to the point of creating pure strains, due to the Orc physiology's need to die in order to spread additional spores. Eldari broods, also taking much longer to create even the first stage of mutations due to their extended lifespans. Their vigilance also undermines many attempts to burgeon a cult, whether upon craftworlds or within the depths of Komorra. Yet humans are by far the most compatible with Genestealer adaptations, on occasion wildly divergent from the norm. The first sighting of the Imgal variant rendered feral by their psychic severing from their hive mind of origin, nonetheless showing intriguing mutations. Chameleonic of flesh, tentacled of mouth, and able to elongate and even fuse their fingers into curved blades. Each hive mind it encounters regardless refuses to reabsorb them, abandoning the cult for unknown reasons. Broodlords, or Corporaptor primus, created by the hive mind to conduct rapid engagements upon nearby planets. This incredibly strong leader species, whilst excelling at combat, utilizes its synapse abilities to communicate effectively with its hive mind and assumes the role of a patriarch ahead of Hive Fleet invasions. Few patriarchs being broodlords in origin, both are nonetheless regarded by its cult as the father, whether a broodlord or an ascended pure strain of a prior cult. Their psychic links with their offspring, turning them into potent psychers, as their bloated forms double over the size of an Astartes. Acting as a beacon to attract the hive mind, each is strong enough to bisect its enemies with tooth and claw, their diamond-hard talons capable of slicing through armored vehicles, though typically it never leaves its den, to which it orchestrates the cult's actions. Ruling alone until a Magus is sired during the 4th generation of the cult, these psychically gifted individuals vie for the Patriarch's favor by infiltrating the host world society using charisma, manipulation, and intelligence gathering. Always bald in appearance and heavy-boned in skeletal form, the Magus operates in plain sight as a spokesman for the cult's ideals, often under the guise of a religious, political, or social agitator. Their psychic shadow growing should they continue to spread their influence. Eventually, such a force coalesces into a being known as a familiar, acting as a nimble attendant which excels at spycraft, connected as they are by a psychic bond. Genestealer Primuses, the next in line of the hierarchy. This military advisor coordinates efforts to ready for the Day of Ascension, while simultaneously ensuring means to spread the cult's influence to other planets. A born leader, capable of masterminding plots to procure voidcraft, armored vehicles, and other resources for the Brood's army. This capable duelist, often sired during the 3rd generation, keeps to the shadows until the time to strike. Armed and armored with the greatest equipment the cult can scavenge, its bloodstream concocts toxins which can be fired from needle pistols or slathered under claws. Their sentient blades, grown from the Patriarch's own biothrone secretions, able to steal life energies from those struck. The cult Benefactus, specializing in harnessing the broodmind's psychic potential. These 4th generation genestealers are drawn from their psi-capable gene stock and mutated to grow in large strains to better disperse the broodmind's telekinetic force. Such raw power rivaling the force created by a las cannon, which proves useful in breaching bunkers or opening sealed vaults. When brute force is insufficient, Benefactus unleash terrible hallucinations onto their foes, now bolstered following the psychic awakening. The cult's Biophagus, sired during the 4th generation. These savants of gene manipulation and bioalchemy ensure reliable spread of the Star God's gifts using virulent concoctions. Infiltrating Officio Medicae hospitals, med-paste factories, and macro-alchemical facilities in order to divert resources to the cult. Some, such as the cult of the Twisted Helix, have managed to extract germ seed directly from their kin in order to spread the Star God's gifts without the need of the Genestealer's kiss or pure strains. Conducting experiments on aberrants using tools such as the Injector Code. On the battlefield, such injected stimulants can enhance such warriors' agility and strength, using concoctions such as gene brews. The most capable Biophagus, given alchemical familiars by their patriarchs to enhance their capabilities. These reclusive souls only leave the confines of their laboratories when the Day of Ascension calls. Clamathus, broadcasting the creed of their cult across the airwaves. These specialists rally the populace using propaganda, speaking of emancipation from tyranny and calls to arms to reclaim their world. Hacking communications using Vox Scrambler arrays in order to hijack broadcasts. Their interception of enemy patrols and military deployments are an invaluable tool to maintain the cult's secrecy as their numbers swell. Combining their equipment with the Patriarch's psychic resonance, these voices of the living god which dwell below utilize the broodmind to transmit null waves alike to a miniaturized shadow in the warp. Causing cranial ruptures, intense migraines, and burst eardrums to those who endure their sonic barrages. Those unworthy to hear the word of the star gods are robbed of their hearing or silenced outright for their rejection of salvation. Kelomorphs, inspiring their kindred as a symbol of their rejection of authoritarian rule. This multi-limbed gunslinger exploits the romanticized figure of a desperado, wielding the Liberator autostubs to put down the wicked. Adapting not only dexterity, but also hypersensory awareness in order to analyze their surroundings, their rapid-fire neurons bolster their reaction speed to superhuman levels, as their thermoceptive vision enables perfect marksmanship even at night. The epitome of the Patriarch's mastery of the populace's psyche made manifest, both Underhive gangers and Uphive aristocrats style themselves after the Kellamorph, seeking out the sigils of the cult on their path to indoctrination. Crafting Volonium bullets for the gunslinger's autostubs, which are capable of piercing ceramite plating, or even lightly armored tanks, many perish willingly from their radio-laced toil, glad to have provided the means for their hero to continue fighting. The robed majesty of the Locus, concealing bodyguards of the cult's magus, these Genestealer equivalents to lictors are capable of besting even the most legendary foes in martial skill, whether they be an Eldar Exarch or a Blade Guard veteran. Thwarting attempts on their magus' life, standing motionless at their postings for hours on end, these Sentinels of the Star Gods wield dual blades to protect their master, concealing toxin-laced stinger tails. Descending into rapid flurries of motion until their foe is slain. With conflict concluded, the Loci regain their composure and readjust their robes, ready to once more maintain their vigil, as their mere presence broadens their magus' psychic influence. Carrying neurotraumal rods crafted in partnership by their magus and Clamavus, these staffs of office broadcast synapse-disrupting frequencies which undermine the judgment of even Inquisitors as they suffer migraines, brain spasms, and visions of suffering. The Nexos aiding their Primus in analyzing vulnerabilities in their dens, military maneuvers, and plans for the Day of Ascension. Their mastery of subterranean ambushes allows for flanking of enemy positions and exploitation of a hive's infrastructure. Coordinating their forces not from the front lines, but within underground strategiums, these beings, benefiting from a fraction of the Patriarch's cognitive acuity, organize billions using their master's psychometric powers. Absorbing the memories and conscious thoughts of every member of their cult at whim, the Nexos transfers sensory data into constant streams of instructions, which are sent to their forces as actionable objectives. Capable of assimilating their subjects' entire life experience with the merest touch, millions of such imprints are stored within their brains, allowing for incredibly complex orders, which are nonetheless very exhausting to perform. The Reductor Saboteurs, specializing in explosives, these sappers compulsively tinker with their craft in an endless pursuit to create the deadliest demolitions. Seeking out materials from toxin-rich hive sumps, servitor dumping grounds, and other hazardous environments, the use of such incendiary devices prove highly beneficial during the opening stages of the cult's uprising. The Sanctuses, targeting any potential threats to the cult's survival with both sniper rifle and Sanctus biodaggers given by their Patriarch. Their camo cloaks, when combined with low-light conditions, render such assassins as nigh invisible. Their blades constructed by the liquefied essence of vanquished cultists and imbued with biomatter. Any struck by their edge inflict agony as a million screaming souls of the deceased assail their minds. Suffused with the psychic scent of their targets by their Patriarch, allowing them to track them to their location. These hunters in the shadows can traverse through the most enclosed spaces with ease, moving in total silence. Pilfering tri-lens goggles from Departmentum Munitorum stockpiles to aid in their tracking of targets using infrared and subsonic spectrums. When not deployed, the Sancti dwell high above their Patriarchs within its throne room. Firing needle rounds from their rifles, laced with toxins crafted by their cult's biophagus. These poisons, crafted from the blood of pure strains, render those afflicted insane, causing those of a psychic disposition to be overloaded by the hive mind's overwhelming majesty. Accompanied by soulsight familiars, which act as spotters when in sniping positions, the Patriarch, when submerged within its Genesis pool, views through the eyes of its form to better locate its quarry. The vast proportion of the cult comprised of hybrids, when the need for brute force is required, aberrants take to the field. These hulking monstrosities are perversion of the purity of the Star God's gifts. Whether the result of spoiled ovipositor implantation or a quirk of warp manipulation, all that bears knowing is that aberrants, though imperfect, regardless have their uses as harbingers of destruction. Wielding enormous power hammers and picks as they charge enemy lines, their mindworm familiars direct them to their targets and imprint the mightiest of aberrants with a portion of their Patriarch's own biomass. As bones break and reform, the entity is reborn into a being known as an Abominant, its agonies rewarded with an even larger frame and regenerative abilities which ensure its survival in battle. Leading the charge of its aberrant kin as their leader, the Abominant is viewed by its kindred with saint-like virtue, their rages lasting entire days, sated only with rampages commensurate with their might. aberrant hypermorphs and abominations noted for their protruding spinal columns which morph into tails. Their barbed hooks slice through flak armor like parchment, enhancing their already incredible combat capabilities. Adrenal, Malstrain, and Vectori strain gene stealers, likewise found within bespoke environments such as space hulks. Each cult is molded by their environment, allowing them to become the apex predator of their surroundings. Subsuming all manner of cultures within their embrace, each cult of the Children of the Stars offers curiosities which humans cannot help be drawn to. The prospects of community, freedom, and righteous vengeance too powerful for most to deny. Hive world cults by far the most numerous, due to their relative ease of assimilating their vast populations of low socioeconomic classification. Their benighted underhives are the perfect breeding ground for a brood's early stages. Civilized worlds benefiting from established trading routes which allow for a cult spread more easily. Feudal worlds are much easier to control should the cult infect senior members of the ruling knight houses, whose very word is law. Deaf worlds utilized by the Imperium as training grounds for military regiments. Though no cult can burgeon on such planets, a singular cunning pure strain can nonetheless infect those posted, aiding in the spread of its genome off-world. As much as 85% of agri-worlds cultivated to grow crops aplenty, it is no wonder why gene stealer cults can thrive with such readily available biomass. Military cults, by contrast, whilst incredibly risk-prone, can bring vast armies into the fold if successful. Feral world cults, capitalizing on the superstitious and technologically regressed inhabitants with ease. Their supplying of superior equipment to such planet inhabitants earns them a pedigree of deific beings, all the better to rapidly spread their creed. Shrine world cults, likewise manipulating its subjects' reliance on religious fervor. Frontier world cults, with few lawmakers to monitor for signs of corruption, ensure a slow but steady rise to a cult's progression. Creating icons to rally their followers under a single banner, most brood brothers bear crests on their chests in the form of stylized bioforms known by its followers as a worm, with the most significant and prosperous cults as follows. The cult of the Four-Armed Emperor, the template to which all gene stealer cults follow. Its control of the Delver world of Gosar Quintus allowed its subjects to spread to every outpost ruled by the Trist dynasty, and even further flung fiefdoms such as Thousandisle. Honoring the mining cults of Trist as their sigil of a stenciled worm is set with precious gemstones in its eye. Though their forebears were entirely purged by the Death Watch, the offspring of Gosar Quintus continued their work to this day. The patriarch of the cult of the Bladed Cog, inhabiting the world of Fineminster Gamma upon landing aboard the freighter Red Spark. Their revolt against the Magos Dominus Ovid Fencium promised emancipation from the Mechanicus' tyranny. Vindicated in knowing that life existed beyond the scope of their planet's smog-choked sky, the Forgeglades of Fineminster now bear the bastardized cog worm as its subjects tattoo slogans of praise on their collarbones and spines. The Brotherhood of the Hive Cult, first sighted on the world of New Gidlam, infesting 12 of its 13 vast hive cities. Tens of billions perished as war erupted from the depths, with banners of the Bladed Worm heralding devastation. Militarized to the extreme with their sigil adorning knuckle dusters, daggers, throwing stars, and other weaponry. Their regalia of bone and purple closely mimics that of Highfleet Leviathan, to which it is assumed their patriarch owes fealty. The Inner Worm Cult, hailing from the abattoir world of Fleischgate, their butchery of groks and other bovine animals to feed the Maudlin system has spawned a gruesome band of insurgents. Their saw-spined worm sigil, honoring the meat slasher tools of their trade, the cult draws inspiration from pulling the enormous parasites from the intestines of their livestock, which in them they see the reflection of their toil within the guts of imperial oppression. Carving not only flesh but also rock, steelwood roots, and industrial detritus from their machinery, the grim trophies which adorn their uniforms are likewise cleaved from their foes with sawblade and knife edge. The cult of the Pauper Princes, originating from the slum world of Chance's Vale, their assimilation of the denizens of its numerous shantytowns of the coastline bear flesh dried by salt mining minerals of their lifeless oceans, easily convincing the populace to join the cult as an alternative to abject poverty, even by imperial standards. Desperation is their calling card, as the ramshackle worm to which they identify is now worn by several gene sects, such as the Devoted Sons, Writhing Worm, Scarlet Talon, and Glacian Gene Sect. Their Magus, Maravich Tendark, conducting a sermon in praise to his patriarch, the Star Savior, each day of the Emperor's ascension, his death at the hands of a rattling sniper, diving in the path of its weapons fire to save his patriarch, only bolstered the cult's fervor, stretching even to the throne world itself. Now praising Maravich as a saint to their cult, a splintered gene sect of the Pauper Princes have since spread their influence to the Sentinel world of Vigilus, following the birth of the Cicatrix Maledictum, naming themselves the Firsting Worm. The cult of the Rusted Claw, rising from the depths of the mining world of Newseam, the Mine Corps toil to unearth precious metals from the planet's crust, and have for years lined the pockets of their Upworld benefactors. Leveraging the populace's embitterment to their overlords as kindling for the flames of rebellion, the Rusted Claw's sigil of the shattered cog of imperial industry, being consumed by a metaphagic worm, exemplifies their nihilistic outlook. Submitting to the inevitability that the void shall consume all, as rust eats away to all that whines and whirs, the divine entropy of the metaphagic worm is welcomed by the cult, should its rampage sate their patriarch's endless hunger. The cult of the Twisted Helix, established upon the Medicaid-class civilized world of Vigorium 3, this exporter of medical supplies has proven a highly exploitable method of spreading the cult's influence. Learning to extract the germ seed from their genetic code to spread more easily across their domains, biophagists inject such a boon into hosts via curative syringe vials under the cover of oddly colored smoke which belches from the chimneys and glass pipelines of countless medifactoria. Their sigil of a stylized caduceus sigil, used by medics and apothecaries the galaxy over. Though aberrations and mutations are rife among those infected by the cult's methods, they all shall regardless rejoice when their hive mind arrives to consume the Vigovium system. The cult of the Second Sun, inhabiting the hive world of Necromunda. Within Hive Secundus, the gene sect endured bombings from Hive Primus until the city capsized and was declared quarantine extremis. As the populace were forbade to speak of Hive Secundus' existence, the cult of the Second Sun began to grow. Their mutations bolstered by the rat bombs which had destroyed their home. Last of the major cults is that of the Brotherhood on the world of Ikar 4, the Second Tyrannic War of 992.M41, marking their ascendance as Hive Fleet Kraken approached. Thwarted by the Ultramarines, aided by the efforts of Inquisitor Angmar, those of the Brotherhood who escaped the wrath of Marneus Calgar were felled by the 13th Penal Legion, the Last Chancers. First of the minor cults is that of the Behemoid Undercut, this offshoot of Hive Fleet Behemoth, operating within several worlds of the realm of Ultramar, despite the attempts of Chaplain Orton Cassius to purge them from the Avenging Sun's domains. Its founders said to worship the hulking Carnifex, Old One Eye, as a saint of their order. Its members ritually remove their right eye and scar the surrounding flesh, in imitation to the prophet of their religion, and attack as a single, overwhelming force. The Bringers of Enraptured Joy, identified by Watch Fortress Castillos Nullifact of the Death Watch within the northern regions of the Segmentum Ultima. This roaming cult poses rogue traders in order to evade suspicion of their fleet. The cult Viridian, situated on the death world of Moraz Free, despite the best efforts of the Catachan jungle fighters stationed on the world to purge the cult from its carnivorous jungle flora, Moraz Free now is fully controlled by the Gene Stealers. The cult of the Grizzle Pit Convicts, liberating the penal world of Damna 4-5, these indentured mining laborers rose up with the arrival of Hive Fleet Leviathan to the Reductus sector during the Stratos campaign. Overthrowing the Damna 4 wardens, though the penal world to which they burgeoned has since been consumed by the hive mind, the Grizzle Pit Convicts continue their furore of emancipation, continuing their spread to distant worlds. The cult of the Star Saviors, festering within the world of Evergrind for over a millennia. Despite losing both their Patriarch and Magus during a precision strike by the Imperial Navy, their Primus Adamant ordered his men to leave the planet of their so-called last hierarch. Adamant slain by the remaining defenders of Evergrind, causing further disruption among their ranks, the world now endures endless post-apocalyptic pandemonium commit by scavengers, savage tribes, and aimless cultists. Cult Tendricul, originally laying claim to the space station designated Delogan. The Black Guardians of Craftworld Ulfway, in their attempts to purge the facility of their presence, invited disaster upon their own people. Farseer Anathrol Starseeker, culling both Gene Stealers and humans in her rampage. With the arrival of the Black Templars to the station's hails for aid, Ulfway were driven off by their blades and bolters. The survivors of the cult escaping to the maiden world of Virgos. Sigils of their kin have been found on over a dozen planets within a single year since the incident upon the Delagan. The cult of the Voidbrood, setting upon the frontier world of Hope Foster following the birth of the Great Rift. Their alliance with the Hive Fleet, which beset the agri world of Terenzi 9, was spared consumption by the Star Children. Ignored by the Hive Fleet forces and recognized simply as spare biomass ready to be devoured when needed, the cult now roams aboard vast bulk freighters alongside their bioships, aiding in the continued harrying of the Terenzi system. The cult Tenebrous, swallowed by a warp storm during 998.M41 and stranded within the Garden of Nurgle whilst aboard their bulklanders. These chaos-corrupted cultists now serve the Grandfather, spreading their defilement of the Star Children's gifts. The Sons of Jormungandr, or Sons for short, hailing from the space stations of the Black Nebula of the Valasi sector. These scions of Hive Fleet Jormungandr prepare thousands of Voidcraft to conquer the system. Followers of the splinter fleet of Hive Fleet Behemoth, the Star Chosen, laying claim to the agri-world of Cornucopia, the Ultramarines' 8th Company attempted to purge the world of their influence with Blade and Bolter, until only Exterminatus' action proved sufficient to prevent their ascension. The Star Kindred of the Gleptid Reach, claiming to worship the Master of Mankind as their chosen deity. Their preachments that the light of their sun shall be swallowed by the void refers to a vision seen by their maguses of a great eclipse. Honoring their solar patron by daubing their war gear with arc lumens and pyres. In truth, the void they perceive is a bioship so vast that it shall blot out the sun on their day of ascension. The worms of the Ur-Tendril, discovered by the Adeptus Custodes deep beneath the throne world following the birth of the Great Rift. Captain General Trajan Valoris refused petitions of the Death Watch to deal with the threat, leading his own shield host to intervene personally. Descending into the Nord Afric underhives to face their foes, their vast numbers claimed one custodian per hundreds of their own, until Valoris slew the Broodlord within its inner sanctum, sparing his kin the sight of its murals within its lair. The cult Hydraic spread far and wide across the Segmentum Pacificus. For centuries, their pure-strain broods have been unleashed from the orbital dockyards of Vigilant Squadrex, starting splinter cults anew. Attacking one gene sect, incurring the wrath of all others, Hydraic's strength and numbers have proven exceptionally effective, as the broodmind harnessed by their high Nexos enacts reprisals sharing insight of their actions to all of their domains. Bioconclaves of the cult of Hypodermoid, fashioning an injector claw known as the Hand of Aberrance, which rapidly injects mutagens into its victims. The involuntary mitosis endured by such hosts sees their bones shatter and muscles burst as they bloom into new lifeforms. The cult of the Blessed Wormlings, sustained solely on the beetles and annelids of the cemetery world of Masushi Pa. These solemn beings believe that their food source draws strength from the entombed within the earth. Preaching that their embrace as lowly creatures in the eyes of their Star Emperor shall bring them close to his majesty. The Blessed Wormlings feast upon the carrion of battlefields and grave pits before departing their feast aboard mortuary void ships. The cult of the Hive Worm, claiming the shrine world of St. Holt within the Charnoth expanse of Imperium Nihilus. This planet, having been harried by the Tau Empire's 5th sphere of expansion, sought shelter within their coastal cities. The Death Watch, dispatching their strike cruiser, Void Sentinel, from Watch Fortress Mortgard to aid the Order of the Blue Robe and St. Holt's Tidecasters. Watch Captain Agathon witnessed the cult's destruction of hives such as Torsei and Delina. Focusing his efforts in sabotaging the shield generators of Leonis Hive, whilst kill teams within Hyde Gedronis cut off armored support from the Gate of the Emperor's Vengeance. Watch Captain Quintus destroyed the Tau lines at the capital of Boran Prime. Driving the Tau into the maws of the Gene Stealers, the Death Watch currently await the opportune time to redeploy once the victor of this ground war is concluded, reserving their strength until battle once more must be joined. For to attack a Gene Stealer cult unprepared is a grave mistake, and no matter the forces brought to bear, should a single disciple of the Children of the Stars escape, our glories shall once again achieve resurgence. We are biological perfection. We blend the ingenuity and cunning of mankind with the blessings of the Star Children. We are stronger, faster, more intelligent than any who challenge us. We will take that which is ours from the Upworlders and remake it in the image of our true masters. It is our destiny. There is a cancer eating at the Imperium. With each decade it advances deeper, leaving drained dead worlds in its wake. This horror, this abomination, has thought and purpose that functions on an unimaginable galactic scale, and all we can do is try to stop the swarms of bioengineered monsters it unleashes upon us almost by instinct. We have given the horror a name to salve our fears. We call it the Tyrannid race, but if it is aware of us at all, it must know us only as prey. The Outer Dark is a mysterious domain of unknowable horror. Each expedition hoping to pierce the veil of darkness thwarted without ever having glimpsed beyond our understanding. Our own galaxy beset by untold malevolent entities birthed from its malice. Only a single species has encroached from outside, dragging a ravenous hunger in its wake, unsated from its prior origins. For today, we shall elucidate the Gestalt organism which feasts on the unenlightened, the apex state of life within this remorseless existence. The children of the stars, the Tyranids. The true origins of the Tyranid species are known, even to my understanding, as one of their disciples. All that can be gleaned is their own galaxy to which they were birthed is far from the Milky Way, its tendrils traversing through the vacuum of space from every corner which surrounds our galaxy. This fact alone suggests all that remains within the far reaches of the universe is the kindred of the Tyranid species. Traveling in groups of bioships housing thousands of lesser organisms, these voidcraft are alike to a swarm of locusts, such living fleets without the use of warp travel, patiently drifting across the void until finding upon a worthy feast. Their specialized Narval hive ships, able to achieve faster than light travel when within the lifeless void. When within the gravitic fields of star systems, these otherwise defenseless vessels rely on sublight speed to prevent overwhelming their navigational sensors. Analyzing electromagnetic signals to locate planets burgeoning with life across vast interstellar distances, the Narvals manipulate the star system's gravitic presence to create a compressed tunnel of space-time to allow its fleet to travel. Using organically induced propulsion to continue their ventures to their prize, as long as decades can pass before a hive fleet strikes its target. Though their gravitic manipulations often herald earthquakes, solar flares, and natural disasters as a sign of a planet's doom. Crafting new beings within their reproduction chambers within, such thralls are disgorged on unsuspecting worlds in droves under the command of the hive ship to which they were spawned. Each bioship connected to the hive fleet has a shared consciousness. Each tendril migration roams the stars in search of biomass to be consumed and assimilated to craft new Tyranid lifeforms. Exponentially reproducing with no understandable end goal, the objectives of the Children of the Stars are unknowable to mortal beings. Its intelligence likely more ancient than even the Necron species, having conquered entire galaxies beyond our comprehension. Harvesting meager species to briefly sate their endless hunger, each Tyranid bioform works in unison to rapidly absorb ecosystems, populations, and bioresources in efforts to repeat the cycle until all fiefdoms of the galaxy are picked clean of life. Each hive fleet consisting of millions of organisms evolving new mutations to best adapt to their environment. Tyranids do not fight for self-defense, conquest, or preservation of sentimental icons, only for their next meal. Migrations of each hive fleet harrying even the most technologically advanced and militarily minded holdouts. This hyper-evolved species consumes all in its wake, regardless if hued of green, merged with mechanism, or flavored with mutation. Each hive mind manifesting a phenomena known as the shadow in the warp. Every single creature under its command acts as a conduit for its will to spread across hundreds of light years of galactic space. Each splinter of its consciousness developing their own tactics and methods to best their foes. Once reconnected to the greater hive mind, the minds of the Tyranids are once more subsumed by the greater whole, tethered by their combined psychic bond. The larger the bioform, the more complex their decision-making, with a few exceptions. The smallest performing but a single task of their design, with no thought for rebellion, disobedience, or perhaps even sentient thought. Synaptically communicating with their kindred using a form of telepathy, the command class of the Great Devourer reorganized their forces with unmatched speed and efficiency. The death of such champions severing the connection to the hive mind and plunging their forces into disarray. Ensuring synaptic control by dispersing the hive mind's consciousness across multiple commanders. The higher up the chain of command our enemy's target, the more exploitable the hive mind's control of its thralls. The superorganism far from the front lines to preserve its intelligence. None have ever glimpsed the true master of the Tyranid species, as it is more than likely it does not even exist within our own galaxy. Likely exerting its will from beyond, funneling the experiences of hive tyrants, Norn queens, and other high-ranking champions back to its consciousness. Perhaps the Milky Way and its denizens are merely a morsel when compared to the civilizations it has prior devoured. Laying claim to all corners of the void in efforts to sate their hunger, the Tyranids are the single most patient predators of the stars, their cold voyages rewarded with warm vitae which slavers their bladed talons. While some speculate the species to be fleeing an even greater foe beyond the pale, or cataclysmic disaster which harries their domains, all that matters is that the Children of the Stars shall not relent in their consumption of the Milky Way by any means necessary. drawn from the outer dark by a flash of light emitted with the destruction of the Pharos device of Sophar during the Great Civil War of the Horus Heresy. Little would the so-called heroes of the Imperium realize that their sacrifice had condemned billions to death. Seizing upon the Astronomicon transmission of the Emperor as a tether to draw the hive mind's thralls to its source, the first official recorded incident of their exposure to humanity was made during 745.1041 within the eastern fringe of the galaxy. Though unsubstantiated rumors insist, the Inquisition has been aware of the threat since the 35th millennium. Awakening from their hibernation, ready to plunge the ocean world of Tyran into disarray, the first Hive Fleet to harry the Imperium left an indelible mark on humanity's psyche. All subsequent sightings of such armies designated titles named after humanity's legends of monstrous entities of folklore. Hive Fleet Behemoth, as it would be known, clad in black chitin and red flesh, struck alike to a hammer blow against Tyran. Inquisitor Fidus Cryptman documenting their variant bioforms and tactics as the foremost expert on what he termed the Tyranids in honor of Tyran's sacrifice. Repelled by the combined strength of the entire chapter of the Ultramarines, aided by the Imperial Navy during their defense of their homeworld of Macragge, their venerated pedigree was proven superfluous in the face of such merciless foes. Chapter Master Marneus Calgar severely wounded during his clash with the Swarmlord which led the advance. The entire first company of the chapter was sacrificed as elements of the Blood Angels, Imperial Fists, Space Wolves and Blood Drinkers purged what remained of its tendrils which attempted to regroup on far distant worlds. Behemoth, though broken, separating into splinter fleets which would ravage the stars in their attempt to achieve resurgence. The brazen actions of such a terrible foe, though inflicting a deep wound, had proven to be an ineffective strategy to oppose humanity entire. Hive Fleet Kraken besetting the Imperium during 993.1041. This time the Great Devourer approached a more widespread assault, dividing its forces piecemeal to better strike simultaneous targets. Forces of the Space Marines, such as the Scythes of the Emperor, Salamanders, Raven Guard, Imperial Fists, Death Watch and Ultramarines confronting the net of slaughter cast around the Segmentum Ultima. Even the Eldar of Craftworld Iyanden resisted the onslaught of the Kraken, eventually blunting its advance. The splinters of the Kraken, now ravaging colonies of the Tau Empire within the eastern fringe. A mere 6 years following the decisive battle of Ikar IV, a new Hive Fleet designated Leviathan arrived far from the staging grounds of all prior campaigns. Attacking from the southern portion of the galaxy, hurtling towards the defenses of the Segmentum Solar, though Inquisitor Cryptman sought to distract the Hive Fleet by diverting them to the orc-infested Octaria sector of the Segmentum Ultima, such battles have only emboldened the Leviathan. Empowered by the vast orc biomass consumed from the Octarius War, Hive Fleet Leviathan's most infamous deeds would be made within the Baal system, fiefdom of the Blood Angel Space Marines. Chapter Master Luis Dante rallying every available successor of the Great Angel's gloried legacy. The Sanguinary Brotherhood gave their lives dearly, with several chapters rendered extinct in their defense of Sanguinius' domains. Leviathan's majesty, torn apart with the birth of the Great Rift across the stars. Were it not for the empiric storms of the Immaterium, Baal would surely have been consumed. The demonic hordes of the blood god, Khorne, further exacerbating Leviathan's feast, providing no sustenance when consumed. Withdrawing its ravaged forces with the arrival of the Primarch Rabute Guilliman's Indomitus Crusade fleet, Leviathan, though denied their banquet of flesh, set its sights upon the throne world of humanity itself. The Emperor's custodians taking drastic actions in attempts to stall its advance, entire surrounding rings of planets were scoured of life to deny the Leviathan its morsels. The forces of the Avenging Sun holding the line as Leviathan strikes from ever more vulnerable positions. The life cycle of the Tyranids, requiring the consumption of all forms of life as we know it. Each planet provides a veritable bounty of mass, capable of being converted into the majesty of the hive mind. Every bedrock, riverbed, and skyline systematically parted from their mortal coil within mere days of toil. Entire ecosystems are drained of their vitality. The Great Devourer's hunger sated for a moment before returning with renewed need. Husks of worlds left as airless tombs unable to be terraformed or salvaged for any practical purpose. Only the demonic thralls of chaos and living metal constructs of the Necrons are immune to the Tyranids' feasting. Beginning their conquests with subtle infiltration, whether by use of a Hive Fleet-created broodlord or fragment of an existing former Genestealer cult, each world destined to be found upon is screened for viability and means to undermine its defenses. Vanguard drone ships and lictors paving the way for Genestealer patriarchs to set roots within the deepest recesses of population centers. These agents, perfectly crafted for their tasks, use concealment, espionage, and manipulation to ensure their objectives are realized. Vanguard drone ships relying on their speed and minimal psychic signatures to evade detection. Once depositing their cargo, they shall conduct reconnaissance of local systems to better prepare for the eventual Hive Fleet invasion. Propagating through gene splicing with the native population in order to burgeon secret societies far from prying eyes, the cunning servants of the Children of the Stars pave the way for their overlords by undermining the societies within which they lurk. Feeding information back to their hive mind once synaptic nodes are within range, each lictor which successfully evades capture or eradication provides crucial insight to the hive mind in its planning of future deployments. With infestation complete, the Hive Fleet synaptic nodes disrupt warp transmissions for several light years of range, the hive mind's casting of their shadow in the warp, severing astrotelepathic communications. Now cut off from calling for reinforcements, the hive ships descend into low orbit, raining down mycetic spores filled with microbes and microorganisms which break down soil, oceanic, floral, and faunal components. Optimizing the planet's ecosystem for consumption, next, Gaunts and Gargoyles lead the charge against the planet's defenders, their pincering between Genestealer cultists and the swarms of the Tyranid Hive Fleet overwhelming enemy positions. Superior numbers, always acceptable, as even in death each fallen Tyranid shall once more return to its bioships to be born anew. Though most Tyranid bioforms do not possess ranged weaponry, their bladed limbs prove more than sufficient in culling their foes. Seeing sentient creatures as nothing more than livestock, communication is a pointless venture considering their standing. The thought of surrender or appeasement inconsequential considering that all Tyranids serve the whims of their hive mind alone. More advanced bioforms such as Morlocks, Trigons, Lictors, Carnifexes, and Raveners targeting more dangerous prey. As capillary towers and spore chimneys connect to the bioships in orbit, the destruction of a planet is all but assured. Extracting mineral wealth, subterranean lifeforms, deep-sea dwellers, and airborne microbes alike once the planet has been secured. Ripper swarms devour everything in sight, whether alive or dead, before plunging themselves into reclamation pools beneath the capillary towers. Genestealer cultists plunged alongside the Ripper swarms into such depths to be digested. The tidal flows of a planet's oceans are modified to filter maritime species into the capillary towers, for once such stages of consumption are achieved, nothing can be salvaged from such doomed worlds. Exterminatus, the only recourse for our enemies once we have achieved subjugation. The longer a hive fleet is allowed to feast, the more resources are at its disposal to craft new bioforms to enact the hive mind's will. Each hive ship and their respective escort ships fed by the capillary towers until their prey world is picked clean of life. The death of entire Tyranid armies a mere trifle. Should the campaign achieve victory, for such carrion will once again be recycled into new life. The lessons learned of each conquest, expanding the experience and intelligence of the hive mind. Hive fleets burgeon not only in number but size, as the organic materials gleaned from their spoils are put to efficient use. Mutating from simple void-faring organisms to vast warships should their storage vesicles be amply fed. Even the capillary towers are broken down once their funneling of materials is complete, so that not a scrap of biomass is wasted. Compressing planetary atmospheres into liquid or solid states through some unknown mechanism, the Tyranids are nothing if not conscientious in their methodical approach to depriving entire star systems of all forms of life. Identifying new genetic patterns derived from its victims to further experiment with new terrifying bioforms. Entire Space Marine chapters have given their lives dearly to prevent the consumed progenoid glands and genetic materials of their primarchs from merging with the hive mind. Withholding adaptations until the optimal time to be developed and deployed. None can comprehend how many variants of the Star Children's majesty remain undiscovered as their tendrils continue to invite us to be part of their glory. The psychic characteristics of the hive mind, wholly separate from the immaterium as we know it, much alike to their biological coding and unknown materials which defy any known catalogue of our experience, the Tyranids' esoteric powers are wholly other. Smothering entire star systems with disruption fields, which prove anathema to the immaterium. This psychostatic, known simply as the Shadow in the Warp, is an apt title to describe its mysterious constitution. Whether an intentional broadcast, or rather an aura exuded by the hive mind, it matters not. The outcome remains the same, insofar that when a hive fleet approaches, its targets panic as mental anguish and despair spread across the population. Psychically attuned species, such as the Eldari, suffering the most from its effects. Should a Psyker attempt to exert their abilities within its clutches, they shall suffer cerebral hemorrhages or worse afflictions as a response. Billions of alien voices clawing at their minds attuned to pitches which drive their listeners insane. Only the most strong-willed witch breed can withstand such trauma, often parroting alien pronouncements without knowing that they utter such ramblings. Astropaths and navigators despairing at their sudden severing from the ties of the immaterium, their lack of safety in both physical terms with no means to call for support nor psychic communion with their peers, unsettles them to their core. Isolation, the calling card which presages annihilation. When the effect of the shadow in the warp is felt, a planet is already doomed. Generations of gene stealers having typically proliferated within the depths, as hordes of star children loom on the horizon. The synaptic web of the hive mind extending across the hive fleets. Planetary invasion swarms, genestealer broods, and entire swathes of space. The swarm function in perfect unison as orders are seamlessly and instantly coordinated. Communal sentience feeding back into the hive mind through chains of dominance hierarchies. Each specialized synapse creature benefiting from enhanced brain function via cortex alterations, reroutes the hive mind's desires alike to a cacophony from beyond. The true scale of the hive mind's collective brain power on a scale which is truly unquantifiable. Without the use of localized synapse creatures, the barrage of information would prove overwhelming for those exerted of its will. Commanders severed from the hive mind's influence, unleashing the flood of raw power unto its lessers, overwhelming their minds unto death. Junior bioforms fare no better should their connection be fully disconnected from the hive mind, now relying purely on instinct, with no means to decipher logic as they descend into animalistic rampages. Synapse creatures, typically potent psychers as we understand the term. While their methods of such feats don't incur the wrath of the chaos entities, it is likely we will never truly understand the means nor power source to which they derive such talents. Each synapse creature channeling the hive mind's power into decipherable conditioning methods, while Dominion accelerates their thrall's aggression into new heights of savage fury. Catalyst manipulates their force's metabolic systems to aid in ignoring severe wounds. The Horror, allowing a synapse creature to flood the minds of their enemies with panic. Onslaught, meanwhile, allows the wielder to guide its thrall's weapons fire towards high-value targets. Paroxysm, triggering the nerve receptors of its target with unspeakable agonies. The Psychic Scream harnesses their hive mind's fury into a sonic blast, overwhelming the minds of those caught within its range, whilst the Warp Blast ability forms such power into a psychic force which can vaporize its opposition outright. The hive fleets of the Great Devourer, each encompassing different strategies and mutations to best enact their objectives. Only 3 have burgeoned to a size capable of terrorizing vast swathes of the galaxy. The first sighted minor hive fleet by the Imperium of Man, known as Tiamat, sighted during the 35th millennium. This likely probing strike for all subsequent Tyranid invasions, though conquering numerous worlds, did not consume all life from their ecosystems. Tyrannoforming the jungled planet of Xiaphora within the Tiamat system into some kind of psychic resonance device which perplexes scholars of the Imperium to this day. This heavily guarded world is the target of regular Deathwatch strikes, perpetrated by Watch Fortress Hulkmote. Adapting their chitinous grey and white carapaces to protect from energy weapons fire, always attacking in dense clusters. Their diamond-hard exoskeletons form living shield walls as they advance to war. Another Hive Fleet incursion made during the 36th millennium, known as Hive Fleet Ouroboros. The writings of the Cardinal of Thracian Primaris, Miriamulus the Elder, describe winged abominations descending from the skies, scouring his fiefdom of the Helican sector. The Ouroboros Wars, spearheaded by the Space Wolves and Warlord Titan pilot of the Mechanicus Cranus. More recent accounts of its resurgence within the Thracian sector and Warzone Lavinia cite these blue-hued aerial experts armed with crude bioplasma-spewing alternatives to more modernized Tyranid weaponry. Hive Fleet Colossus, entering the eastern fringe of the Ultima Segmentum during the 38th millennium. Creatures bearing similarity to centaurs, likely of the Zoat species, roam the void within their voidcraft, resembling stone. Communing with other species telepathically, claiming to be slaves, escaping servitude from their masters. The Ordo Xenos declared Colossus Xenos Horrificus, seeing to their purge during 226.M39 during the Zoroastra Attila Wars of the Helican Crusade. Rumoured to be resurgent in their strength during 897.M41 upon the civilized world of Fresiax, Wolflord Bran Redmore of the Space Wolves dispatched 2 Grey Hunter squads to the spaceport of Montberg to aid the planet's evacuation before Exterminatus was conducted. Only 6 Astartes surviving Colossus's assault of Fresiax. Though Imperial High Command demanded them stripped of all honors for disobeying their orders, Redmore instead promoted them to his personal Wolf Guard. Hive Fleet Behemoth, the architects of the first major offensive endured by the galaxy. This juggernaut, which sought to target the most prestigious vanguard of the Imperium, attempted a gambit to demoralize humanity. Sundered within a single year of its deployment to the Ultima Segmentum, due to the tenacious efforts spearheaded by the Ultramarines during the First Tyrannic War, by 745.M41, little remained of their legacy thanks to the efforts of the White Scars and Navis Imperialis, scouring them from the void. Splinterfleet fragments of its former glory, such as the Calfstrain Epsilon, Court of the Nephilim King, Crimson Moor, Dendrobates, and Cordrex Strain, persisting to this day as unsubtle yet deadly combatants. Hive Fleet Naga, invading the galaxy from the territories of the Eastern Fringe during 801.M41. Their scouring of untold Xenos worlds held by Tau and Eldar defenders have earned it the title of Shinade, the endlessly winding serpent. Supposedly destroyed during 812.M41 by Craftworld's Malantai, Iandan, and Idare. Regardless, the hive mind assimilated dozens of biomass samples, gleaning information on potentially valuable mutations derived from the Eldar breed. Hive Fleet Dagon, considered a splinter of Behemoth, which has harried the Jericho Reach since 812.M41. The Orpheus salient of the Achilles Crusade has suffered the greatest suffering from this tendril's actions, including the extinction of the Freya system. Hive Fleet Gorgon, besetting the Tau Empire during 899.M41. The worlds consumed by its rampage are known henceforth as the Zone of Silence, forcing an alliance of the Imperial Guard and Blueskins to join forces. Commander Farsight and Castellan Krask believing their efforts to have purged Gorgon from the galaxy. Sightings on the agri-worlds of the Pagria system have laid such assertions to rest as they rebuild their strength. Hive Fleet Moloch threatening the agri-world of Jolov during 932.M41 against the Katajan jungle fighters, Mordian Iron Guard, and additional support from the Agathon, Karnak, and Molov regiments. The Vostroyan 9th Old Irascibles falling on Karak Prime during 998.M41 in the wake of the Imperium's defeat. Their detonation of the Hive Primus' nucleonic stack destroyed over 85% of the Hive, leaving what remained to starve during the subsequent winter season, ending the reign of Hive Fleet Moloch forever. Hive Fleet Scarabus embattled against the 9th Cadian shock troopers upon the fortress world of Carcassonne during 937.M41. Such is the pedigree of these corpse worshippers, they incurred not a single loss to their companies in their purge of the Tyranids. Hive Fleet Locust invading the imperial world of Ulmor during 945.M41. The Ultramarines combated the Swarm during the Battle of Ulmor, condemning much of the population to death with their late arrival. Hive Fleet Eumenides, confronted by Commander Shadowsun during 990.M41 on the planet of Kitab of the Kepula system. The Raven's Watch chapter of Astartes destroyed their primary synapse node to aid pacifying these green and bronze-clad warriors. Hive Fleet Kraken, more subtle in its methods. During 992.M41, multiple star systems endured its predations, yet the Ultramarines, now replenished in number and prepared for its aggression, systematically diminished the forces of this vast Hive Fleet. Kraken splinter fleets dividing into those attributed as Formant Ultra, Icar Magna, Myril Rex, and Sofa Secundus. The Myril system has endured much suffering as a result, as too did the Space Marines of the Scythes of the Emperor. Hive Fleet Jormungandr, defeated during 995.M41 during the Battle of the Black Nebula by Admiral Vortigern Hanroth. Its predation of unprotected worlds caused its numbers to burgeon across the Falasi, Palangir, and Rortrid sectors. Combining their Mycetic Spore deployments with barrages of debris and asteroids to draw enemy fire, their Raveners, Morlocks, and Trigons burrow deep underground, awaiting critical mass of the fleet before striking. Hive Fleet Leviathan, the most successful vanguard of the Hivemind's conquest. Having learned from Behemoth and Kraken's efforts, its multi-pronged assault during the Third and Fourth Tyrannic Wars have humbled even the Ultramarines. Their slaughter enacted during 997.M41 barely hindered by the Krypton census, which sacrificed worlds across entire segmentums at the cost of hundreds of astropath lives. Forewarned and forearmed, the Imperium nonetheless took heavy casualties, not least amongst the ranks of the Scions of Sanguinius. Its two-pronged assault, alike to a Maw within the void, bleeding additional forces of the Ultramarines, Mortifactors, Deathwatch, and untold Astra Militarum regiments who confronted the left half of its invasion on Tarsus Ultra. Baal devastated, as hundreds of angels fell in defense of their Primarch's fiefdom. Now further reinforcements of the Leviathan beset the western fringe of the galaxy, striking outposts across the Segmentum Pacificus. Splinters of the Third Tyrannic War, now dubbed as Kastinov, Adaric, Grail Alpha, Griffon Prime, Praxima Strain, Scarrock Swarm, Solstice Omega, and Tarsus Majoris, little would the Imperium know of the far distant division of Leviathan's might, preparing for another invasion. these tendrils of the Hive Fleet, dubbed Norchulon, Promephor, and Grendulus, the Indomitas Crusade strains under the burden of repelling the Great Devourer from the borders of the Throne World itself. Hive Fleet Medusa ravaging the Ghoul Star sector of space during 998.1041. The Space Wolves chapter defended the ice world of Sadrak alongside the 10th Slovak garrison of the Imperial Guard, forcing them to withdraw from the Imperium's domains. Hive Fleet Hydra awakening prematurely from their slumber during the closing days of the 41st millennium thanks to the meddling of the Poisoned Fang Cabal. Within the eastern spiral of the galactic south, these rapidly regenerating bioforms of purple hues unleashed devastation. Their every death followed by a scream which drew new swarms to their location. Despite the efforts of the White Scars and Imperial forces of Lord General Syvar Deus, it would fall to the Harlequin Mask of the Soaring Spite in coalition with Craftworld Saimhan to repel their advance. Hive Fleet Kronos amassing strength following the creation of the Cicatrix Maledictum. Strange rituals conducted by the Thousand Suns seem to lure the Hive Fleet to specific destinations, though it is uncertain if this is intended to repel or harness their slaughter. The most potent harnessers of the Shadow of the Warp known to exist, their null powers are bolstered by storms of organic missile barrages and ranged weapons fire. Hive Fleet Garma among the new strains discovered during the era Indomitus. Their ravaging of the death worlds of the Voltis sector and Caligari sector infected as many planets with mycetic spores as feasible. Enduring exterminatus countermeasures made in efforts to stem their spread. Garma burrowed deep into the planet's surface to survive, awaiting the time for their true Hive Fleet advance to arrive. Hive Fleet Lotan combating the Vectoriums of the Death Guard's 4th and 7th Plague Companies on the world of Desp. This jungle world suffered poisoning by both the Grandfather's Thralls and Venomthropes of the Tyranids. Virus bombs and demonic diseases further despoiling the planet's surface. Upon tasting but a sample of the gory soup that remained, the Hive Fleet recoiled from its corrosive effects, bombarding the planet until only an ocean of toxic slurry too potent for even the Devourer to consume remained. Hive Fleet Typhon amongst the strangest of all Tyranid forces. This Hive Fleet is the only one to practice cannibalism of rival Hive Fleets, preying on those weakened from their newly conquered worlds. Consuming elements of Hive Fleet Kronos and Leviathan during their joint scouring of the Chalnaf expanse. Once done with its contemporaries, Hive Fleet Typhon devoured the feral world of Yanapad and now turns its attentions towards the agri-world of Herkanayat. Lesser-known fleets such as Agadsta, Arachne, Canfaridae, Carcharodon, Carnivora, Cerberus, Cetu, Charybdis, Chimera, Dagoth, Grendel, Harbinger, Catus, Karkinos, Ladon, Megalodon, Nemesis, Ophidia, Perseus, Proteus, Typhos, Scytalis, Scylla, Titanulisis, Vega, and Xerxes eking out their own legacies across the void. With each passing year, the influence of the Children of the Stars burgeons. The bioforms of the Great Devourer, myriad in their application, variety, and mutations. These gene-spliced apex creatures, grown from the harvested matter of conquered worlds, are the vanguard to which the hive mind prospers. Every weapon, projectile, and appendage bioengineered by the hive mind's boundless ingenuity. Whether biocannon or bladed claw, each is fused to their host into a symbiotic amalgamation. The point to which one begins and another ends, difficult to ascertain with regards to some bioforms. Every one is adapted perfectly for their task, whether as shock troopers, ranged bombardment cannons, or assassins. Tyrannocytes transporting ground forces as a ship-to-surface vessel. Upon impact, their guts disgorge their cargo, only to fill their cavernous bellies with air, in order to float into the skies and rain death with their Deathspitter bioweapons. Biotitans, by far the largest bioform unleashed upon the battlefield, in response to war machines deployed by all manner of denizens of the galaxy. These constructs as tall as 30 meters attack foes with both enormous legs and spewed toxins to corrode and pierce the plating of even the most enormous foes. Norn Queens, regarded as the matriarchs of the Tyranid species, responsible for the birthing of all known forms of life. These biomechanically enhanced breeders manipulate biomass as required by the needs of the Hive Fleet and are housed within vast and well-protected chambers. Large dominatrices, standing almost as tall as a biotitan, defending their Norn Queen's birthing chamber. These female equivalents of hive tyrants exceed their contemporaries' physical strength and are fused with a synaptic warrior bioform to maintain a link to their Norn Queen. Norn emissaries, carrying out the will of their Norn Queen personally. These massive bioforms combine graceful strength with psychic ability, making them a martial match for even custodians, abducting valuable prey for study by their mistress. Hive Tyrants, standing as the most senior frontline enforcers of the hive mind's will, these senior bioforms command entire armies under their sway and share the closest bond to the hive mind. Highly mutable, whether armed with wings, heavy plate, bladed arms, or barbed whips, these variant repositories of the Gestalt collective mind of the Tyranid consciousness, such as the Swarmlord, have humbled many a champion of the Void in single combat, whether they be Space Marine, Eldar, or Greenskin. Maleceptors, exerting psychic projectiles from its mind as a conduit of the hive mind psychic power, small arms fire is consumed by its psychic barriers, as cranial explosions are induced onto any mortal who veers too close to its presence. Their torsos embedded with orbs of encephalic tissue which distills the hive mind psychic presence. These blind beasts are too valuable to be deployed carelessly, and thus are accompanied by zoanthropes and neurothropes to bolster their gifts. Broodlords, the methods to which new Genestealer cults' legacies are born. These planetary insurgents sire entire generations of offspring to undermine planetary societies, and should they be confronted in single combat, their claws are plenty to fell their enemies. Independent and highly intelligent creatures, should a Broodlord be slain, their pure-strain children shall continue their work, often extending their legacies as the patriarchs of untold splinter cults to follow, spread far and wide across the stars. Tyrant Guard bioforms, a specialized breed made to defend their hive tyrant overlord. Their immense size, tough chitinous plating, and formidable martial prowess makes them difficult to injure, let alone slay. Their minds utterly subsumed by their hive tyrant, rendering them blind should their master fall in battle. Many an Adeptus Mechanicus Magi believes their origin to be derived from Space Marine physiology, marking them as a shameful reminder of the Corpse Emperor's failings. Carnifexes, also known as Screamer Killers by the humans, lumbering into battle like to a living tank. No fortress nor armored column is safe when confronted by such enormous foes, as their armor shrugs off all but the mightiest of weapons. The equivalent in scale to a Space Marine dreadnought, while some specialize in brute force, best utilized in dismembering armored vehicles, others produce toxins, which specialize in culling vast swathes of infantry once fired alike to artillery from their shoulders. Tervigons, carrying dozens of Termagants into battle. Though typically stationed aboard bioships to guard from invasion, if needed for frontline duties, they are deployed within the backlines until needed to breach fortress walls and disgorge their spawn into the thick of fighting. Harrispexes, created only to eat and nothing more. This latter deployed bioform hastens tyrannoforming by tearing apart sturdier prey such as Space Marine corpses, rending through ceramite and sinew with its 3 sets of jaws. Capable of dispatching enemy platoons and armored vehicles if necessary due to its mighty constitution, its ravenous appetite gorges on the dead and dying without pause until regurgitating its spoils into the nearest digestion pool. Biovores, launching spore mines from afar which grow from their engorged bodies. It is believed such a mutation is evolved from greenskin genetic materials as an adaptation of their proclivity to utilize squigs and rudimentary explosives to deadly effect. Pyrovore variants, feasting on the dead and wounded to sate their gnawing hunger. Their fireballs cast from flamespurt bioweapons, while deadly, can also be detonated should they be injured, causing acidic immolation to spray across any within their range. Exocrines, controlled by the bioplasmic cannon biomorphs, mounted on their spines. These enormous, mobile artillery platforms deliver long-range firepower to forward advances, sundering even the most menacing of foes. Tyrannofexes, similarly carrying heavy weapons which in contrast they are fused to their torsos. Only the arsenal of Biotitans exceeds their sheer firepower capabilities, as they lead broods of Termagants to saturate enemy positions with overwhelming suppression. Wielding acid spray, flesh borer, and rupture cannons to destroy their foes. This potent bioform also benefits from anti-infantry weaponry embedded within its thorax, but is ponderously slow to reach its opposition. Sporocysts, embedding themselves into the surface of the planet before their spore chimneys pollute the air with microorganisms. Their use of spore mines and mucilid spores protect them from harm, and are on occasion reinforced by the hive mind with additional sporocysts in order to create airborne minefields to stall enemy advances. Raveners, a combination of both Ripper and Tyranid warrior traits. These subterranean hunters burrow beneath enemy lines before launching surprise attacks on lightly armored encampments. Zoanthropes, the most psychically gifted genus of the bioforms. Their enormous swollen brain-to-body ratio belies their talent for esoterica, as they unleash psychic barrages on their foes whilst floating high above the ground. Said to have evolved having consumed Eldari DNA from Craftworld Iyanden during the invasion of Hive Fleet Kraken. Should such speculation be true, it bears credence to the notion that even should a Hive Fleet be repelled or fragmented, their insight is regarded as transmitted to their hive mind in order to capitalize on the traits of their foes. their next stage of evolution deemed as Neurothropes. These larger variants are said to descend from the being known as the Doom of Malan Tai, and are capable of healing nearby zoanthropes and galvanizing their nearby psychic power into terrifying force. Venomthropes floating across the battlefield, spewing their gas-filled bladders to kill the ecosystem which surrounds them. When unleashed in large numbers, their poisons kill all life which grows and induces nausea, vomiting, and muscle spasms to those who breathe their toxins. Neurotyrants, harnessing the power of the Shadow in the Warp as an organic, mobile command center. This support bioform hovers over terrain, exerting its psychic talents over its kin to better coordinate their efforts. All non-Tyranid forces within its presence, rendered mad by agonies caused by its raw power. Often, several smaller Neuraloids accompany it into battle, deciphering the desires of their foes to best capitalize on their fears, ambitions, and frailties. Malanthropes, bearing similarities to both lictors and zoanthropes, despite being twice the size of the latter. These rarely seen bioforms following the final tedium of the Ripper Swarm's toil, collect genetic materials from fallen foes which may benefit the hive mind. Scouring the battlefield in hopes of gleaning templates which may lead to future adaptations. Though inevitably reabsorbed into the biomass of their hive fleet, their consumption of promising samples which are digested and stored in their torso sacs are also a boon for their respective Norn Queen. Trigons, exceeding the scale of even Carnifexes, similar in appearance to the Ravener bioforms. These gargantuan serpents lead tunnel swarms consisting of lictors and hormigons below, as their vibrations create bioelectric currents which stun their foes. Morlocks, a mutation of the Trigon, which are more worm-like and lacking sight. Their short claws excel at tunneling efficiency at the cost of martial skill, and are utilized to create subterranean complexes to better funnel forces into ambush positions. Swallowing their prey whole, which are broken down over days of digestion, their sensory abilities to glean information from air pressure and surface tremors allows them to locate targets. The Hive Guard, protecting valuable structures, such as capillary towers with ranged weapons. These heavily armored warriors establish firing positions for their Impaler cannons, which fire shard beasts that track enemy positions mid-flight. Tyranid warriors, the workhorse of the Synapse creatures. Their middling connection to the Hive Swarm allows for coordination of their forces, whether striking within melee or ranged firing positions. Lictors, among the most widespread specialists of their breed, these lone assassins, bearing chameleonic skin, can blend seamlessly into their surroundings before striking their prey. Ambushing convoys, military leaders, or other high-value targets. Their equivalent of commando raids aid in the initial stages of Genestealer insurgency, as their consumption of enemy brain matter forewarns them of exploitable vulnerabilities. Gaunts, the most basic bioforms which attack in swarms. These underlings benefiting from additional adrenal sacs, spike rifles, and bladed claws. On occasion, overwhelm enemy positions with sheer numbers, clogging the machines of war with their slain. Additional variants such as Hellgaunts, Terragaunts, Slashgaunts, Razorgaunts, Crygaunts, Exogaunts, Malgaunts, Mortargaunts, Rendergaunts, Protogaunts, Lashgaunts, Genogaunts, and Toxogaunts, adapted from myriad hive fleets. This equivalent of cannon fodder is not to be underestimated, especially when attacking in groups. Termagaunts, specializing in ranged attacks and standing upright rather than on all fours alike to its gaunt cousins. Though originally designed to patrol the arterial passages of bioships, they have found new purpose as frontline infantry units. Accompanying Tyranid warriors into battle, protecting them from harm by firing suppressive fire at their foes. These cunning creatures, uncommonly for bioforms, retain an instinct for self-preservation and prefer to attack from vantage points. The first to flee a battle should their connection to the hive mind be severed. Within underground caves or ruined defense posts, Termagaunts form nests together, ready to fire their spike rifles, strangle webs, devourers, and shard launchers at anyone who attempts to breach their shelter. Hormagaunts, created from the template of Termagaunts as a means to mutate a melee-oriented alternative. These more heavily armored variants of a regular Gaunt cut their foes to ribbons, now with accelerated speed, strength, and aggression. Single-mindedly pursuing their prey, with no thought for fatigue or injury. Swarms of these brutes feed upon their prey to fuel their next advance, as their hyperactive metabolism mimics but a fragment of the hive mind's appetite. Incredibly short-lived as a result of their adaptations, often Hormagaunts are the first to be deployed by the initial Mycetic Spore invasion in large numbers, left to their own devices rather than a centralized command to wreak havoc while they can. Neurogaunts are particularly rarely sighted subspecies of Gaunt, which tends to the Hive Fleet's Synapse network. These support bioforms act as a relay connection point to the hive mind and protect more senior Synapse creatures from harm. Hosting parasitical neurocytes which extend the range of the hive mind's influence. Larger node beasts lead such Neurogaunt squads into battle when necessary, often in defense of key positions rather than to advance on enemies. Barbgorns, acting as small artillery platforms which attack at the forefront of the Hive Guard and Biovore assaults. Their back-mounted barb launchers require 5 limbs to steady their aim as they unleash long-range devastation. The Von Ryan Leapers, combining genetic material from both lictors and Hormagorns to create an agile ambush predator. Unlike lictors, these creatures attack in groups, as their leaper talons rend flesh and armor alike to parchment. Gargoyles, the aerial equivalent of the Gaunts genus, though their legs are atrophied into stumps to allow better aerodynamics, their array of ranged weaponry rains destruction from the skies as their brethren attack from below. Harpies, developed from the Trigon genus, working alongside gargoyles to achieve aerial dominance. The cysts which festoon their undersides rain spore mines from high, whilst their shrieks disorientate those who attempt to flee. Armed with twin-linked Stranglethorn cannons, heavy venom cannons, and scything talons, their strafing runs and daring dive attacks harry foes both beyond and beneath a planet's atmosphere. Hive Crones develop from Harpy stock to target enemy aircraft in order to achieve aerial superiority. Its armaments known as Tentaclids explode on impact, whilst their drool cannons release acidic fluid on land-based enemies. Tasked with protecting bioships within the void of space from smaller enemy aircraft, their claws can tear open armored vehicles if needed, all the better to expose their crew into the void of space or drag them plummeting to the surface. Ripper Swarms, designed to devour DNA and nutrients from their surroundings. Though not created for combat, they are nonetheless a terrifying foe to encounter when charging in swarms numbering in the thousands. Cortex Leeches, by far the smallest bioform available to the swarm. These feeders manipulate the brains of host victims by inserting their feelers through their ears, noses and eyes, controlling them as meat shields to defend larger kin. Several bespoke species, such as the Nautiloid, Viragon, Vitiator, Cerebor, Dactylis, Haradan, Malefactors, Dimacharion, Psychophagus, Dimacharion, Fawnbacks, and other species, adding to the numberless amount of variations which the bioforms can take. None truly know the full extent to every single mutation. For in the end, every bioform is merely a means to which the hive mind extracts its meals to provide nourishment for its endless majesty. And if needed, the universe as we know it, beyond our understanding, has already proven insufficient to stem its hunger. So what chance do you mere morsels think you have denying its feast?
To defeat the Tyranids, we must study them. There's more than a few million lives at stake here. More than 50 worlds. The whole of the Imperium of Man could be wiped out by these beasts. They must be stopped at any cost. Any cost.
Old One-Eye is a Carnifex of Highfleet Behemoth. One of the few survivors from the Great Devourer's devastating First Tyrannic War, its ability to regenerate from grievous wounds has allowed it to bear the scars of its rampage for centuries. Trapped upon the world of Calth, following its injury to its brain by a plasma pistol blast, which bored through its right eye, such a trauma is the only one to leave a permanent scar, perhaps due to the brief deactivation of its cognitive function. Frozen beneath the ice packs of the planet as the defenders of Ultramar purged its kin from Calth. With the arrival of a band of smugglers, the Carnifex was thawed from its decades-long hibernation. Releasing not a corpse, but a living colossus which devoured the smugglers in short order, now separated from the hive mind of Behemoth, the Carnifex turned to striking haptomes, population centers, and convoys within reach of its claws. Drawing abandoned remnants of the First Tyrannic War, such as Termagorns, and developing Genestealer cults to fight by its side, as the apex Tyranid organism of Calth rallied its kin, it would fall to the Ultramarine Scout Sergeant, Telion, to attempt an assassination. Firing a peerless sniper round at its ruined eye socket, which would be the envy of even the most capable Space Marine marksman. Now writhing in pain, Old One-Eye stumbled into an enormous ravine, though none of Telion's scouts managed to identify its corpse. Its rapid cell regeneration, now commonplace amongst the Carnifex bioforms of Highfleet Leviathan, the followers of the Behemoid undercult worship Old One-Eye as a saint of their creed, ritually scarring their faces, tattooing its form on their flesh, and gouging their own right eyes out as an act of devotion to the Behemoth. Reports of a ruined Carnifex still reported across several outposts of the realm of Ultramar to this day. Many are baffled as to how this Goliath could have managed to travel off-world, nor how it has survived over a dozen claims of being felled.
Emperor knows what pit spawned the hideous apparition we came to know as the Red Terror. It first attacked the outer bastion and 24 men died before he drove it away with flamers. We never even found the bodies of Lieutenant Boreals and Captain Lowe, just a trail of slime that led away from the command post and into the tunnels. It returned the following night, and the slaughter began anew. But this time, we were ready for it. Or so we thought.
The Red Terror is a Ravener of Highfleet Kraken. Conducting preliminary reconnaissance and surgical strike maneuvers during 998.M41, 2 years prior to its Highfleet's invasion, this merciless hunter preyed upon the populace of the starport of Devlin Primus. Slaying 24 souls of the mining world before escaping retribution, the dismembered remains of its slaughter earned it the fell moniker to which it is known, in reference to the gory spectacle's impact on morale. No survivors of its encounters remaining, with only scant details gleaned from surveillance footage and tall tales. Its blood-drenched carapace is the stuff of nightmares, as rumors persist that its maw can swallow men whole. Destroying each search and destroy team sent to track it within the tunnels of Devlin Primus, this towering menace, said to be as large as a Trigon, is so efficient that many call into question whether it is an ancient and experienced foe, or rather multiple beings of similar countenance. Escaping aboard a gigantic ore transport alongside refugees of the world of Adri's Hope during a breach of quarantine. Investigations of the automated landing zone, followed by the sudden lack of communications, discovered something more akin to an abattoir than a voidcraft. Thousands of men, women and children massacred by the Red Terror, so too did their homeworld of origin become a bloodbath, as sightings suggest the Ravener's presence thereafter. Scholars of the Ordo Xenos speculating the Red Terror's actions to have been influenced by the Hivemind's creation of much larger Morlock and Trigon bioforms in order to replicate its characteristics. Whether this forebear of the Ravener breed is still active today remains unknown. The parasite of Mortrex is a unique bioform of Highfleet Kraken. Formed from the genetic experimentation of a Norn Queen, this evolution of a typical Tyranid warrior Shrike earned its namesake from the Imperial Fortress world of Mortrex. Amongst the most heavily defended outposts of the Segmentum Ultima, Mortrex, though festooned with gun batteries and fortifications, endured for solar days until its doom became inevitable. The winged creature of the Norn Queen, plucking Astra Militarum defenders from their ramparts and lashing its tail, each soldier struck by its barbed ovipositor received a Ripper embryo which matured within a few heartbeats of blood flow. Devouring their host from the inside out as their screams broke the morale of their allies. Gore aplenty heralded swarms of new life forms birthed from chest cavities as defenders chose whether to fight the foe above or those hastily scuttling at their heels. Rapidly accelerating the digestion of Mortrex's populace as panic spread across their failing lines, the so-called parasite had ensured the fall of the Fortress world 2 solar weeks henceforth, as a single astropathic transmission warned Imperial authorities of a new ravenous bioform. Its bat-winged form, not sighted since, many believe this angel of the four-armed Emperor to merely be an experiment to which the Norn Queen found wanting. Its claws and fanged maw perhaps remolded into new forms with the fall of Mortrex. Whether the parasite of Mortrex still roams the stars or not, the mere remembrance of its actions remains a terrifying tale for the pawns of the false Emperor to regale. Waking from vivid nightmares, envisioning this terror of the stars, planting its ravenous offspring. The Nephilim King is a hive tyrant of Highfleet Behemoth. Overlord of a splinter of its Highfleet of origin, this imposing leader of the court of the Nephilim King preys on the remote systems of the frontier worlds of the Ultima Segmentum in efforts to carve a path to the galactic core. First encountered within the Nephilim sector to which its name is derived, the Raven Wing of the Dark Angels chapter of Astartes failed to stem their advance to the world of Rakor 9, wherein the Knights of House Raven next stood defiant in its path. Deploying synapse creatures, warriors, and biotitans to assault their minds as well as physical forms, the Knights observed with horror that the court mimicked a reflection of their own customs of knightly brotherhood. Preying on House Raven's prideful aggression, as the Nephilim King's forces isolated and destroyed the Knights piecemeal, Rakor 9 fell to its rampage, with few survivors of the house escaping, swearing oaths of vengeance upon the court. Its brow bearing a coronet known as the Crown Spike. Its talons, deadly coil whips, and living bone sword draws life essence from its prey, while all manner of both small arms and heavy armaments fail to pierce its carapace armor of black and gold. Intelligent, ferocious, and adorned in all manner of deadly appendages, thus far none have come close to ending the reign of the Nephilim King, nor the court of advanced bioforms which pledge allegiance to its rule.
It is the very embodiment of a predator, a soulless, remorseless beast which carries with it the weight of uncounted alien minds, all hungry for our flesh.
The Dagon Overlord is the war leader of Hive Fleet Dagon, a synapse creature which spearheaded its Hive Fleet's assault of the Jericho Reach. This genus, whether crafted as a bespoke tool to sunder its foes, or awakened from the hive mind's greatest arsenal of weapons, has regardless left a lasting impression. Cleaving the amethyst spires of Tremalov Hive, slaughtering its defenders within a single month of conflict, those who fled from the planet of Castabel tell of a warrior without peer, which exceeds even the strength of a hive tyrant. The Overlord, as it is known by common parlance, glistening in fluids which seep from its chitinous armor plating. Its tangible, gruesome mood instills fear in its enemies, whilst emboldening those which fight by its side. Embodying Hive Fleet Dagon's hatred towards the denizens of the Jericho Reach, every significant combat zone of the Orpheus Salient has endured the wrath of this entity, as swarms devour its doomed inhabitants. Its continual redeployment causing many to believe that several Overlords exist as part of a new breed of bioforms. Whatever its true essence, both the Ordo Xenos and Deathwatch Space Marines' attempts to discern such have all failed miserably, losing all hands in the process. Rising from every stalemate, even stronger to counter its foes, this Gestalt avatar of violence carries out the will of its Hive Fleet, with no signs of ending its spree of conquest. The Doom of Malantai is a zoanthrope of Hive Fleet Naga. Unleashing its wrath upon Craftworld Malantai during 812.M41, which had previously fortified its defenses against the Orc Xenos, this specially adapted zoanthrope bioform gorged not only on the sinews of the Eldar, but even their souls. Underestimating the danger of the lacerated bioship which lurched into their domains, the children of Malantai busied themselves facing the physical threat which beset them, whilst ignoring this otherwise feeble-seeming bioform. Growing in psychic power as it supped upon their souls, once connected to the Craftworld's infinity circuit, no harm could be inflicted upon it, its power shattering aspect warriors and wraithlords as if mere trifles. Denizens of the sundered Craftworld fleeing their domains as all hope for victory proved impossible, having prophesied another fell omen by use of their prognosticators, the Grey Knight Space Marines sought to purge the vessel hereafter. Inhabited by the Keeper of Secrets, Nakari, who feasted on the spirit stones left behind by the endless winding serpent, the purifiers of Brother Captain Pelenas cleansed the Craftworld of chaos infestation, banishing the greater demon within the dome of Crystal Seers. Justicar Anval Thorn and a dozen of his men slain in the encounter, a strike team of Farseer Tech Silverhand of Iandan would now find upon the now orc-infested derelict during 994.M41, following their own harrying by Hive Fleet Kraken, seeking resources to repair their own Craftworld. Leaving with no trace of anything valuable due to the Greenskins' vandalism, the husk of the vessel would be directed into a collision course with the nearest sun in order to prevent its despoilments any further. The Doom of Malantai, said to be the primogenitor for all the neurophrope bioforms to which every Hive Fleet now fields. All Psychers of the Great Devourer are bolstered immensely, having learned valuable lessons from their forebears' destruction of the Eldari.
It's there! I know it is! Lurking in the shadows, stalking me like an animal! It's death itself, I tell you, just watching me, waiting. Oh, blessed Emperor! Why won't it just kill me?
The Death Leaper is a lictor of Hive Fleet Leviathan. quite possibly the most capable assassin of the Four-Armed Emperor. Not even I know what target eludes this lone hunter at present, which excels at spreading confusion and anxiety amongst its prey. First sighted during the invasion of the missionary world of St. Caspalan during 997.M41, reports of an exceptionally capable lictor felling the aides of the planet's spiritual leader, Cardinal Salem, plunged the population into mayhem whilst denying him his martyrdom. Prowling bunker complexes, daubing his pristine garments with the viscera of his bodyguards, with no hint of wounds to his flesh time and again. Cardinal Salem's sanity fractured after 10 days of slaughter, knowing his life was at the mercy of the lictor. Breaking the morale of the planetary defense forces as they beheld their paragon descend into paranoid ramblings. With the arrival of Hive Fleet Leviathan, St. Caspellan was now easy prey for the Death Leaper's kindred. The Hive Fleet forming a bespoke breed of the Star Children in the image of the original Death Leaper. This evolutionary apex of the Lictor breed had succeeded where its predecessor, which had harried the world of Medusa 5 as part of Hive Fleet Behemoth, had failed. Death Leapers now spread far across Hive Fleet Leviathan to lead their vanguard. The original terror weapon of the Star Children strikes swiftly across enemy lines, sundering mortals and false angels alike with its dreaded claws. What lies beneath is a Trigon of Hive Fleet Dagon. First sighted during the invasion of the Hive world of Castabel, salvaged security recordings taken from Hive Trimolov showed evidence of this enormous being's rampage. Detonating the plasma core within the city, ensuring the collapse of its crucial power ventilation, lighting, defensive arsenal, and water supply needs, the Trigon recognized the machine's needs for a retrofit, severing the pipes which transported its cooling fluid. Believing the Trigon to have been sundered by the resultant explosion, Imperial survivors recounted to Inquisitorial agents that the creature was sighted once more upon the shrine world of Kredos, attacking behind enemy lines. Targeting an Imperial supply depot, wherein the base commander had ignored regulations on proper Promethium storage tank requirements. The detonation of their recent full resupply of artillery shells within the nearby facility's field munitorum was once more believed to have slain the burrowing entity. Hundreds of tanks and thousands of their crews destroyed during the blast, yet more incidents would unfold mere weeks later, often within systems across the expanse of the Achilles Crusade. Recognizing the creature to be responsible for all such precisely timed disasters, the Imperials dubbed the Trigon simply as what lies beneath. Yet their belief that such a being was an unthinking monster was far too egregious a mistake considering its actions. Working only alongside Hermagorns to enact its surgical strikes, what lies beneath always attacked within the opening stages of Dagon's ecological invasions. Attempts by command staff of the Achilles Crusade, unable to censure stories told of its rampages. Whether appearing by virtue of genetic prioritization coding or the use of mycetic spore transports, the Imperials have utterly failed in their attempts to capture or glean insight on its mechanisms used to undermine their defenses. Its reputation burgeoning with every story told of its demise within cataclysmic explosions, only to return again to reap new harvests of slaughter. Commanders have routinely limited ammunition and fuel reserves as a precaution to prevent its resurgence. The Adeptus Mechanicus utilizing seismographic installations in an attempt to track its maneuvers. Many deride the Tech Adept's use of such limited resources to track but a single target. Its distinctive ventral stripe identifying it as other than its similar breed. Never is what lies beneath seen fighting conventional engagements in deference to hit-and-run attacks, wherein retreat is assured. The Mist Reaper is a lictor of Hive Fleet Dagon, harrying the Orpheus salient at the forefront of its hive mind's forces. This assassin brought the Imperial world of Xi'an to heel, utilizing the environment to its advantage. Disappearances of key military and governing officials coinciding with its appearance. Though few traces of its prey have been found, none are under any misapprehensions that another force is the perpetrator of such incidents. Lurking within the bounds of small outposts to drag its victims into the surrounding sulphurous fog, the epithet of the lictor is well attributed, as abductions have escalated with little recovered from the missing bodies. Ambushing its pursuers before blending back into the mists, this exploiter of opportune targets has eluded capture or purge ever since, with only rumors of its very existence hushed by fearful denizens of the Jericho Reach. This has been a tale of the Children of the Stars, read by the Disseminator. Though you may fear the maw of our great emancipator, fear not its bite, for in death new life shall be born, propagated from your genetic code, alike to your own base needs. Mortals often fear the encroaching end to life, unaware of what the future holds, unwilling to surrender control of your imprint on existence, not knowing how your actions shall affect the future. A life well lived in pursuit of a larger goal is crucial to find peace, for even should you stray from the path of righteousness, there is always the chance to begin anew. So do not worry for actions beyond your control, nor beyond the scope of your life too harshly. Instead, resolve the issues within reach, allowing for a grander future to be built through 1,000 smaller actions.